There's a lot of inventions that we almost take for granted because they're either small or they're just so woven into our everyday lives that we don't even think of them as inventions. Scissors, buttons and zips, these are all inventions that once didn't exist at all, and now they're part of everyday life. You can look back through history and really see how the world has changed through the lens of invention. Probably the first invention ever was the stone tool. It wasn't even us, it was a species of hominids before us, our ancient ancestors, out on the savannah in Africa. And some bright spark, some inventor, picked up a stone tool and fashioned it into a blade and made something that they could use to enhance their life and to make something easier or better. One of the great inventions that's lost to prehistory, or the inventor of it at least is lost to prehistory, is the brick. Rather than living in a cave or just under a piece of reed matting, to actually build a purpose-built shelter using sun-dried mud bricks. That idea has only been around for about 8, 9, 10,000 years, and no one knows who invented it. But what a great invention that changed the way people live. The chair, even, is an invention. Chairs weren't in regular use until the Middle Ages, really. Royalty certainly had chairs and thrones and things in ancient Egypt and some ancient civilizations, but people in ordinary homes just didn't use chairs until then. So, I think the chair is a great invention, and nobody knows who invented it. Often the most important inventions have a really long history, and you can so rarely say that one person has ever invented something, for example, like the light bulb. The roots of that lie in the discovery of the battery in 1799, and then the discovery of the heating effect of an electric current through a wire in the early 19th century. And then someone decided to put it in a glass bulb, and because they'd realised that it makes light, and that was in the 1830s. And then someone realised the air makes the metal oxidize, so it ruins the filament inside, and so they said, well, let's take the air out. And eventually Edison found a way to make a really good filament and to use a really good vacuum pump. He didn't invent the light bulb, but he found a way to make it practical. The second half of the 19th century is a really interesting time in the history of invention, because a lot of the really founding inventions of our modern way of life came about then. Really important things that define the way we live today. But another one that often gets forgotten is synthetic materials. With the rise of the chemical industry, people started experimenting with mixing all different stuff together, and it was back in the 1830s, really, that someone mixed and heated wood with nitric acid. And they made this new material, nitrocellulose. And one of the first applications for it, really, was in billiard balls, because there was a competition to find a replacement for ivory, which was becoming rare. But the only thing was that nitrocellulose is really a very explosive material, even just with impact. If they hit the billiard balls just a little bit too hard, they would literally explode. In the saloon bars across America, people would suddenly draw their guns out because they thought there was a gunfight going on, but it was just people playing billiards. But what happened then with that material was that parkazine, which is made in a very similar way, started to become popular for making trinkets and knife handles and things around the home. So it was really the first time that a synthetic material found its way into people's homes and into people's lives. And it also became, again a slightly different version, became celluloid, which allowed photographic film to be made onto rolls rather than plates. And that really made photography itself accessible to the masses. And of course then moving film became possible because of celluloid. When people were trying to work out how to fly, that's a dream that people have had for hundreds of years, if not thousands of years. But that period of time around when the Wright brothers finally achieved proper powered flight, there were lots of people trying to achieve that dream. People just got this idea that it was possible, and lots of people tried. And because lots of people tried, I think some of them were those classic crackpot inventors, eccentrics who'd just try anything. They'd have an idea, not really research it very well, and just try it out. And why not? It's quite fortunate for us that moving pictures had not long been invented, because we can look back and see some funny archives of that frantic period of invention when everyone wanted to have a go. People can be driven to invent or inspired to invent for a million different reasons, and sometimes it can even be professional rivalry. There's a classic story from the history of telephony. Shortly after the invention of the telephone, when more and more people started getting telephones in their homes and businesses, it wasn't like today where you can just dial a number and get straight through to anyone in the world. You would get through to the switchboard and they would literally patch you into who you wanted to speak to. This manual switchboard worked just fine for most people, but there was someone in America, Mr. Strowger, who owned a funeral director's company. The number of clients he was getting started to go down, and he suddenly realised that the wife of one of his competitors was working at the switchboard, and she was putting people through to her husband rather than Mr. Strowger. And so that drove him to find a way to circumvent the wife of his competitor, and he invented the automatic telephone exchange, which was quite a clever thing, really, wasn't it, for a funeral director to do. People have been asked endlessly, what do you think is the best invention of the 20th century, or the best invention of the 19th century, or the best invention of all time? And I think there's so many different ways to think about that question. One way is to look further back and look at the influence of something. So I think that's why a lot of people say the wheel is the best invention, because it's had such a huge influence. But perhaps the best invention is the one that's the cleverest or the keenest idea that can have such a huge influence over a short time. So, I mean, I would say perhaps the internet or the World Wide Web is perhaps the best invention for me. It's allowing people who've never had a voice to have a voice. It's, I think, really enhancing democracy. When I look forward to the future, I think invention will always be with us. It's part of who we are. The more stuff we invent, the more stuff we have to invent to go along with it or to improve it. It's easy to think that everything that can be invented has already been invented, or someone else will think of it. And there are nearly 7 billion people in the world. Someone else must have thought of that idea. But if everyone thought like that, no one would have a great idea. So I think it's almost our duty to have an open mind, and to if you get a great idea and some insight, then follow it up and work on it.